on the right-hand side, you should be able to see something that says comments.
Okay.
Once we start to see them come through, people start to say hi. So I need to, first of all, do that. If you could have seen me like 2 seconds ago, I even made the silliest video ever. I made myself laugh on Instagram. On my Instagram stories, like killing myself laughing, dancing, because I was like, I'm just so hyped this morning.
Actually, I should have shared it as well. Sweet
Shared
sweets
what?
and nuts.
Oh,
That we're gonna have this talk live.
that's true. But you know what? They will see it on, because I've tagged you, so hopefully it
Okay,
should
great.
come through.
Have a look as well.
I'm gonna have a little look-see. So like this is the only downside when you stream to 2 places, which is you can't always see who's there. So I have to kind of wait patiently for people like, hi, I'm here. But I've already had messages that we will have guests joining, and there is tangible excitement. I think maybe that's just all in my head too, but still, I've had messages.
Great.
Um,
Awesome.
I love this kind of global conversation, just to bring it all together.
Yeah.
I think I've got so many reasons for saying this, but just to still like shout out to all of our sisters in the US regardless. But the Black female experience is very US centric in many ways.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone just said, how do we join the event? So it usually takes 2 to 3 minutes before people start to say hi, don't be scared, hi mama. So I'm going to put it up so you can see.
Awesome.
Thank you always for saying hi. You make me feel so much better. Like, I knew we wouldn't be only talking to ourselves. Nevertheless, it always feels good to see that first hello come up on the screen. Okay. So hello, Ajua. Hello, hello. It's like now. Can I be cheeky, Adju, and ask you, can you see? Because I can't see how many people are here so far. We just see 0. Is it just you and Mama at the moment? This is only green tea. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. All right, hold on. Yay. This is like the real support, the real love. And I'm going to get started because I think my intro today is going to be a little bit longer, just for the fact that I'm excited about this conversation for 2 reasons. The timing, well, actually more than 2. The timing was coincidental ahead of it being Black History Month UK starting from tomorrow. But it's the exciting part about being able to create this space for our global Black sisterhood. I think in many cases, we may have loads of conversations because we are Black women, but sometimes we don't direct the conversation around the journey of Black women specifically. And I think this is like a really important conversation, because part of accepting, and I'm not saying that we always have to lead with our Black foot first, but because that's one of the most identifiable characteristics we have, we shouldn't avoid it, and we can't avoid it. And this is why I'm so happy to have Aisha here today, because we want to talk about that global experience. We want to talk about the fact that as Black women, our path, even if we have all the right certificates, even if we have all the right qualifications, doesn't often mirror the path that we see on television, the traditional career path, where you go to university, you study this, you know what you wanted to do from the age of 2. We don't always get that opportunity, because even if we are good enough, even if we are, to quote Lindsay Stewart from before, making twice the difference, it doesn't always mean we get that recognition. So like, this is why I'm super excited to be able to have this kind of global conversation. So without further ado, Aisha, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and then we can jump straight into it.
Cool. I love that introduction, Leanne. Thank you. Also super excited for our chats. So I'm Aisha Pandor, CEO of and co-founder of a company called SweepSouth. We're based out of South Africa. We're a online platform that connects home service providers and primarily domestic workers, so home cleaners who are unemployed or underemployed, with customers who need their services. And what we're doing is essentially trying to use technology to make the experience of getting access to work opportunities in markets like South Africa that have very high levels of unemployment, using technology to facilitate easier access to opportunities to work, but importantly for us, also trying to drive it in a way that looks at dignified treatment of the workers who do this work. The recognition that many of these women are mothers, are single mothers, and you know how that links to what they're paid, the hours that they work, the expectations of the type of work that they do, and opening up other opportunities by virtue of this network that we've created, that mean that ideally we're not saying, you know, you are a domestic worker who works through our platform and that's what you'll be for the rest of your life, but how can we surface inspiring stories, access to educational courses, ways to reduce your living costs through our networks, etc., that mean that we're providing a more holistic, supportive environment than you would have if you were just working for one private employer, for example.
I love it. Sorry to interrupt. I was just listening and my brain's going ping, 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 because you look at the whole ecosystem and actually just listening to you talking, it's made me think about my own vocabulary, like thinking about saying cleaner, etc. I don't mean it in any sort of derogatory way, just to be clear about the fact, but as you said, domestic worker, you know, there is something that elevates and puts respect to what they do. And the fact that you're creating safety, the fact that you're creating opportunity to say this can be your starting point, but your starting point by no means defines your end point. But what we do want to make sure is you have access to opportunity. We want to make sure that you're safe, but we also want to make sure that we're contributing to your economic stability, that you can then go forth, and I call it the circle of money, but it starts there. You know, you earn enough, then you can save enough, then you can invest enough, and then you can put more back into the community. And that's changing generational, you know, it's changing generational possibilities. And I think that's the level of impact of what you're doing. It's not just providing someone with a job, it's the ability to revolutionize the way their family lives for generations.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. And those are things that we actively track. So, you know, we provide an annual survey that looks at what are the earnings of not just people who are working through our platform, but actually the broader community of domestic workers in South Africa. What do they earn and how does that compare to living costs? And then try and make that information public, because a lot of people just don't know, or a lot of people don't really have these conversations like, hey, you know, I'm paying you this much. What does this mean for your ability to provide for your family?
Right.
You know, do you need less? Do you need more? What are the other forms of support that you need? So that's important. And then also, I mean, we definitely view our impact as relevant to the broader community, whether that's, again, you know, we know the difference in outcomes between children whose parents are working versus children whose parents don't work. So very, very important to us to look at, you know, the broader community. And in addition to my work with SweepSouth, I'm obviously a Black woman who started a technology company. I think through that experience and through the experience of fundraising, have realized how these unconscious biases can result in it being very difficult for people who don't look like the rest of the technology ecosystem in whatever your market you're in, how difficult it can be to fundraise. And I think that's both on the side of investors seeing you as investable, but also on behalf of yourself going into meetings with these people who look nothing like you and who, you know, in many ways have a very different life story to you, very different life experiences to you, and just feeling, you know, very much like an alien in those contexts. So I'm part of a venture capital fund that looks at investing in underrepresented founders. who are building impactful businesses at scale. And maybe just interesting also for the context of our discussion, I'm not someone with a tech background. Definitely didn't see myself until sort of mid-20s as a person who would start a technology-based company. So my background is in human genetics. I have a PhD in molecular human genetics focused on gene therapy research, but yeah, was just drawn into the entrepreneurial journey, and that's where I'm definitely going to spend the rest of my life.
No, and I love that, because there's so much about, as Black women, we're already defined by people's own stereotypes, their assumptions as to how we are, how we function. And then what you have on top of it is that overlay of, these are the qualifications you need. These are the kinds of people that, in my case, run a strategic management consultancy. In your case, run a tech startup and a venture, like an impact fund. People are meant to be, or they expect you to say, well, I worked at this investment bank for 20 years, and I worked at, before I decided to step out, I worked at McKinsey or Bain or whatever. And that's nothing against those companies. But I think we have to understand that we have something special, and part of embracing that, and that's a journey each of us, and I've had to go on, which is, if you know your value and you know your worth, when you're in the situation, if you can kind of express that confidence, I say your qualifications in that sense shouldn't matter, because the qualifications that we've created are pretty much arbitrary. But as Black women, we have to find 10 times harder. What did they say? Black women are we are overqualified, the most qualified group ever. You have a PhD, I do not. You have a PhD, yet still that shows, irrespective of what you've specialized in, it shows a tenet of commitment. It shows a level of, intelligence. Why are we not rating those kinds of characteristics? And I think it's also for me to say, we don't have to follow the path just because we've done something for so long. Nobody can validate our ability to do. And I think because we sometimes, and I've been guilty of this, because I've thought so much about how I might be judged by those who don't look like me, it's made me kind of go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to say it. But also, if somebody isn't taking part in your growth, they remember you at a particular point in time. So the person you are today might seem fake to them, but it's not fake, because you've grown into who you are. They've just not seen the process. And that for me is the part where you go to yourself, actually, don't worry what people think, because if they don't share your journey, they don't understand whether you're qualified for this or not. They're basing you on the Leanna 5 years ago, the Aisha of 10 years ago, and going, how is she doing that? Because I know her as. But who you were isn't who you become, and isn't who you are. And I think we have to think about our own growth and think about embracing who we are, because that little voice on your shoulder says, you're so fake. That's not who you are. That's not who they know you as. Since when are you doing this? How come you're doing that? Almost to say, who authorized you to do this?
I
can tell you.
Absolutely.
Me.
Absolutely.
I authorized me to do it.
It's such a good point. Such a good point. And I think, that idea of sort of getting input and needing to feel invited by someone else, so looking for at the outside world for validation. And again, the reality is that across all high levels of achievement within all industries across the world, Black women are underrepresented. So if you're looking outside of yourself as you climb the ladder for validation, you're not going to get it. That's that can't be your sense of, am I good enough? Because you're always, for the foreseeable future, unfortunately, that's the way that the world is at the moment and the status quo. You're going to be sitting with people who don't look like you, who probably don't appreciate what you bring to the table until you deliver. As you say, you've got to over deliver, and then they see it. And so I think that it really underscores the importance of nurturing that confidence and that sense of self within yourself, and building that up. And I'm a big advocate of fake it till you make it. Like, you've got to deliver, and you've got to work hard at delivering. That's incredibly important. And I also say that as Black women who are doing these things, there's also additional responsibility, because unfortunately, if you fail, and as women, actually, I'm looking at the Theranos trial that's become this big international thing. And there's so many other stories of founders, male founders, who've done similar things in the past few years. So, you are unfortunately the example. So please, let's not mess it up for those who come after us. But there also has to be an element of the confidence of, fake it till you make it, and fake it is not the skills and the experience and the ability, but the confidence. So that you have that feeling of I belong. I don't need someone else to give me validation or to tell me that I can sit at the table. Like, my experience, who I am, what I've done, what I will do, gives me that right.
Right. And I think there's something also to be said about us as Black women coming together to support each other. To really, the validation may not come from those who don't look like us, but we have to make a larger effort to build. And I know sisterhood, the word itself sounds so trite, but I mean it in its original meaning of sharing, community, collaborating, being open, being abundant in our mindset, all of that stuff, so that we can validate each other. Because if fundamentally the benchmark we are pitched against is complete, you can't measure you can't track performance of an investment grade fund against a high yield benchmark. It doesn't work. You can't compare apples and oranges. They're not the same thing. They don't have the same facets. And in many cases, that's what it is for us. We're compared against something that we're not, but neither do we need to be successful.
Absolutely.
And I read the book, The Miseducation of the Negro, and there's one thing that's always stuck with me, and it stuck with me completely the whole time. And it says pretty much that if you are not true to yourself, and if you don't embrace who you are as a Black person, everything that you do will be a poor imitation of the rest. When I thought about it, I was like, yeah, I don't want to be, and this is just like a random person I've picked, but I don't want to be the next Martha Stewart. She's great, whatever, awesome. But I don't want to be the next Martha Stewart, because that is not the model. That is not the image we have. It's like, how can I be my best self according to the values, tenets, and everything else we have as Black people, as Black women, as opposed to wanting to be someone completely different. And in that sense, I've shaved my hair. It wasn't a statement, but it's also kind of learning to embrace our own beauty, whichever way it is. I'm not saying I will go to wigs again at some point. That's no question. But it's kind of understanding that our power is in our authenticity, not in our imitation.
Yeah. And look, I think, so I think that point around hair is obviously such a emotive thing. And it's not about what you look like and how you choose to sort of, physically represent yourself, but it's the comfort or discomfort that you sit in when you are being you in your most natural form. And I think the question is more about that, is that if I don't have straight hair, do I feel uncomfortable? Do I feel like I'm being judged? And does that impact how I then show up? And I think that's more the issue, rather than, what do I look like today? And I think it's so important, because it took me a while to actually embrace braids. I remember thinking, and I had blonde braids, and I remember actually thinking, oh, I'm fundraising now. Is it too extreme for investors? Should I? And I remember seeing, I'd get onto a video call, and people would be like, "Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot to take in." Again, unfortunately, it does mean, and I'm a realist, and I don't believe in sort of do whatever in the face of flying against reality. Like, the reality is that it does mean that I probably have to then, in my tone and in the way I present myself, be a little bit more serious. Like, I've almost got to compensate for the preconceived notions that come with you seeing, oh, platinum braids. Whoa. So I think it's we've got to be realistic. But again, I think it speaks to, making sure that in terms of how you deliver that, you're on point. And unfortunately, other people don't have the same level of that same burden.
Right.
That
And we just know
we
it.
have. Yeah, yeah, and I love the point you made about the benchmarking. And I remember in whatever it was, 2004, when Facebook came out, and I have the unfortunate, just like by chance coincidence of being the same age as Mark Zuckerberg. And I was sort of thinking about, my husband is an engineer, and he was talking about, like one day getting into technology, blah, blah. And I was like, look at that guy and look at me. We are so far away from each other. Tech entrepreneur is a white guy in a hoodie, and this is so overused now, but at the time, he was the guy. And I just thought there's absolutely no way. Like that's just not a career that is applicable or open to me. And dismissed it. And again, he was the same age as me, and I was like, look what he's accomplished. He's been to Harvard, he's done this, he's done that. Just not familiar to me, not impossible. And then the last thing I wanted to say about that was that I still deal with it now. 7 years after running a company, I still deal with. We hire new people. They've come from a different environment. They're people who, at the stage that our company now is at, are skilled. They know what they're doing, and I often have to think, like, when they look at me and they experience my style, and they experience the fact that I'm a mother, this is not what they expect from a CEO in many ways, right? And so how do I embrace that in a way that shows them that, in terms of performance and leadership and deliverables, and like, I'm there, but I don't look, think, speak, act, dress like what you expect a CEO from all of your prior experience to be like.
Right. And I think therein lies the key, which is we don't need to imitate any other definition of what a CEO should be. What do they say? Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. So you are a CEO. That's it. And how you do it is how a CEO does it. End of story. And I think, it's not easy for us to apply that kind of knowledge or behavior to the way we go, because as you said, the outside forces tell us so many different things. Yeah. And I think that's part of, and, I really have to say this, that is part and parcel of the journey. Not every day is a good day. Not every day is a day where I wake up like today, where I'm like hyped and just like, yes, that's not how I feel every day, because just like you said, when you're having conversations, I can tell you, I was asked by a company to be an ambassador. And in this conversation, I was approached. And in this conversation, it was like running down my CV. And I kind of turned around to the guy and said, listen, with all due respect, you reached out to me and this is not an interview. So either you want to talk to me and you're going to sell to me why you need me, or we don't need to have a conversation anymore. Yeah. I never would have done that before. I never would have done that even 2 years ago, because I would have been so flattered to have had the attention that someone so senior, so whatever, was looking in my direction, that I would have just accepted it. But it's that part of like, sometimes you find the courage, sometimes you're like, I can do this. Whereas other times you're like, do I really want to be? And it's real talk. And this is part of also embracing our path, which is, you don't always have to feel like a warrior. You don't always have to feel like I'm going to take everybody down. Sometimes you're just like, do I really want to go and have this conversation? Do I really want to be, quote unquote, that black in this situation? Or am I going to just let it ride and pick my battles so that I can have energy for another day? And I think that's also something that's really important, that we have to know that we're having this conversation, but the conversation isn't to say every day is a warrior day, every second day is a warrior day. It's to say the reality is that we come up against so many questions, barriers, pushback, all that kind of stuff. But we also have to understand that the other part is doing the work on ourselves and trying to make more of an effort to build community, to build ecosystem that is created with Black women. That we can provide each other with that validation, because we are all sitting in the same pool. irrespective of what your heritage is. Nobody who doesn't belong to us makes a line of demarcation that you come from South Africa, that I come from, like that I'm British Jamaican. They just see two Black women. That's it. And I think that's, for me, where we have to go to embrace our path, which is our path might not look like you said about Mark Zuckerberg. Even now, when I see, when they did Whitney Heard and Bumble, and the youngest one, what is she, 30? Or you see like some woman in China and she's become a billionaire in a year because she sells this vape thing, and you're like, why don't I think of some sort of idea like this? But the truth is, I don't want to have thought of an idea like that. I want to have thought of something that's impactful, not just about money, but it's going to change and create a better place for future generations of Black women, future generations of women of color, depending on what part of my little structure we're looking at. But the point is that we compare ourselves to people who have had a systemic advantage.
Yeah. And a completely different life journey, right? I think far more important than, how much you earn and how, what's your net worth, and are you on the front of, Forbes magazine and whatever else. Exactly. Far more important than that is, as you say, what's important to you, and what do you choose to make your life's work. And I think, the question about what our experiences are like as women of color, as we go through our careers, it's not about trying to turn everyone into, the next billionaire or whatever. It's about, are you able to have access to the same opportunities? Hey, if you don't want to, do that, and work to you is something that is, it's meaningful, but it's something that you balance proportionally with everything else in your life, and and is not the thing that drives you, then that's great. If work is the thing that drives you and you want to get to the top of your career, that's great. But we should all have the opportunities to be able to make those choices. And I think the challenge is that currently many Black women, by far the majority, don't have the opportunity to say, in conversations like that where someone has approached you and is now going through a CV, most people, because of the challenges that we've been through, most women, and very systematized discrimination, systems that have been put in place historically for millennia,
right,
don't have the opportunity to go, well, listen, you approached me, because they're desperate for that work, because it's key to them paying the bills or making that next step career-wise, or whatever the case is. So I think that the conversation is more about, and I've also had to sort of reframe this in my mind, is equity around opportunities, and then what we do with those.
Right. And I think there's room for us, and there's room for each of us. Not every Black woman has to fight the fight, and that's also embracing your path. Yeah. It will affect you because by nature, because of the way we look, but not everybody has to fight the fight.
Absolutely.
And nor should you feel that you have to do it just because you're Black or a Black woman. Yeah. Like it's embracing where you feel comfortable, but understanding that irrespective of what you do or don't do, the system is as it is, and it still has an effect on you. No matter what you do. And I think that's the part of, I think there's definitely a fear around, I don't want to be seen to be political. I don't want to be seen to be, too Black or pushing too much. But a part of your embracing your path is actually knowing how you feel comfortable, or even, I would say better, knowing how you can make an impact. And, not everything that you do has to be done for public consumption. It doesn't have to be done for the gaze. And it might just be, it might just be going out of your way to find that one young Black girl in the office that you've seen for ages and you've never said anything to her. And it might just be saying, hey, would you like to go for coffee? No one needs to know. No one even
Yeah.
needs to know why you're doing it. But I think it's
Yeah.
taking the opportunity to say, we don't all have to be warriors and we don't all have to do something public, but we can find a way to give back, because
Absolutely.
understanding how the system has been built, it's also been built by sharing information from one generation to the other in
Mm.
order to benefit the next person. And I think for me, if that's the one thing we all learn, it's that sharing information, they say knowledge is power. And on the one hand it is, but sharing it makes you a lot stronger
Yeah.
than holding it in isolation.
Absolutely, absolutely, and something that drives me is this idea of, so I'm super big on gratitude. Like, I just think if you go through life with a grateful attitude, um, I think that it rubs off on other people. I think it rubs off on the
Mm-hmm.
way that you live your life. It rubs off on your family. It rubs off on the people who you're grateful towards, who want to give you more and do more for
Mm-hmm.
you. Um, and I think the choice that I've made is to live life with under sort of the aura of gratitude. And what that also enables me to do is go, you know what, like, in being grateful for all of the amazing opportunities and privileges that I've had, even in the context of being a girl who's grown up in just post-apartheid South Africa, with all of the challenges that represented. But I have opportunities that my parents didn't have. And how do I then pass on the baton to the next generation in whatever way? And big or small is not the right thing to say, because, who's to say what's big or small?
Correct.
That coffee with the girl who doesn't speak up, who knows what the impact that is going to create in her life, how big that actually could be. So it's not big or small, but so in whatever way that you can pass it on,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I've tried to focus on. And how can you use the tools, the privileges, the advantages that you've had in a positive way to say that, literally every day I'm trying to just make the space that I'm in a bit better than it was yesterday.
Right.
And the benefit of that has actually been, and so this is an approach that I've consciously tried to take with every day for the last year or so. And what it's meant is also that I'm a happier person every single day. And sure, they're bad days and whatever, but I'm like, it's a day. It's a day where I'm alive. I still have my family. I still have my job. I have all of these things still to be grateful for. That is a day where I should still focus it on how can I make this day better for the people that I engage with, than what their yesterday was. I think it's and so that feeling of sisterhood and network, I think, is great, and I think how powerful if you could have this network of sisters across the world who all had that mindset. I think that's how you create change, rather
Mm-hmm.
than, we have the right to be angry, but often anger closes people up. I think if you go, we've got this huge force of people across the world. There are more of us actually than anyone else. People, women of color, there are more of
Right.
us across
More.
the globe, right? Than any other sort of group. If we used our networks with each other, to that sort of effect, I think that's how you really, really create lasting change, and can change the world in terms of, like, an example of how the world acts. Being generous rather than selfish, being open rather than closed, being grateful rather than angry. Trying to create space for others and pull people up as you go along, rather than feeling like there's only this small piece of the pie that I have to try and defend because someone else has said to me that the piece of pie is that big. And not when the reality is that in this world there is huge abundance, and we all can have whatever we want.
Right. There is, and I think, the one thing we probably always don't tell ourselves, and I can think about it just constantly, is we don't tell ourselves that we all are role models to someone, even if you don't know who's looking. And that doesn't mean you have to be famous, and it doesn't mean you have to be senior, and it doesn't mean that you actually have to be anything that people say is value. The correlation to a person's value is literally, like, I can't have, the word was in my head and it popped out. Again, it begins with an A. If someone knows that word I'm looking for, arbitrary, that's it. Someone's value is totally arbitrary. We base people's value on salary, position, all of that kind of stuff. But the reality is all of us have the possibility. And like you said, it's not big or small. We all have the possibility to give something back to somebody else. And that's how it starts. I think about Leanne at 22, and I think about if there had been an older Black woman that I knew that had just said, hey, let's go for coffee in asset management, that would have, I don't want to change my path where I am today. That's not what I'm saying, but it would have opened up the way I also behaved when I came into contact with other Black women. It would have changed the way I would have felt about this is what we're trying to build. And it's now's the right time. I get it, but still, it's understanding that we all have that ability. We all have that ability to extend the hand of sisterhood to each other to say, I might not know you, but let me take a chance on you rather than anybody else. And that's not a bad thing to do, because I think we've been so scared and ashamed almost. And this is why I'm so happy to be having this conversation with you, is that we've been scared, ashamed, and also made to feel as though talking about Black women, talking about Black stuff is racist, which it's not. I don't need to tell anyone who's here, but we've been shamed into feeling that we have to. Why are you picking Black people? Why are you picking Black women? But it's something that we have to talk about, because if we don't back us, who will?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, it's the difference between having these conversations in a way that is open. And by open, I don't mean being forthcoming. By open, I mean where your arms are open and you are willing to listen to everyone and to engage with everyone, rather than having these conversations in a way that is closed. Right. My husband is, he's Eastern European, but he lives in South Africa. He's gone through a civil war and, moved to South Africa in the midst of a civil war over there in former Yugoslavia. My children are mixed race. I also think about, when I have these conversations about my experience, how do I have them with my children in a way that doesn't make them feel ashamed for, the contribution of their dad and who their dad is. So I'm really about being open about these things, but I'm also about doing it in a way that says, and I think it's really important, because our human nature is to identify with people who look like us. So it's really important to have the Mark Zuckerberg who looks like me. I think, and hopefully that's also what I'm doing for young female tech entrepreneurs in South Africa and in Africa. And I think it's really important to have the person who looks like you invite you for coffee.
Right.
But they are not the be all and end all of who needs to address inequality. And they're not the be all and end all of where these conversations need to happen. You have to engage with openly and invitingly, but engage with, white men and women about the roles that they can play in a constructive way in helping to address inequality. And they can play in, reducing, toxic masculinity in the workplace, and the sorts of things that can cause women to clam up and, and shut up and not feel like they can be part of important conversations.
Yep. And I'm just going to echo what you said as well. So I'm going to say this, because I always say this. My husband's white, but his whiteness does not define my Blackness. End of story for me. So, if there's any conversation to be had about racism, you've obviously met my son. So mixed race children, it's them embracing both parts of their, both parts of their cultures, both parts of their identity. And it's also having these conversations, because I think, just like you said, and this applies corporate, this applies personally, is that there are two strands of work to be done. There's the part on the side of the corporates, for sure. Like, we know companies and their cultures need to fix up and change. But there's our side as the Black women. We also need to make sure we're ready for the opportunity, because the worst thing that could happen is that things change and you're not ready. Like that right there could be a huge problem. But it's It's saying we have to have these conversations. We have
Mm.
to have the conversation around being Black women, embracing our path, being able to
Yeah.
lead some conversations within our
Yeah.
own community and being
Mm.
part of this global sisterhood. But the next level is, how do we then translate these kinds of conversations into conversations externally with people who don't look like us? Because
Mm. Mm.
you're right, we are the global majority, no question, but we're not the global power, we're not the power holders in that
Yes.
sense.
Mm.
So how do we find that balance of being able to say, this is where I sit? What responsibilities do I potentially have being the only Black woman in a predominantly non-Black room? What
Mm.
can I do to contribute to this conversation to give them an inkling into the fact that whilst I'm sitting in this room, the price of entry is not the same? How
Yes.
can we express that in a way that doesn't cause people to close doors, but
Mm.
understands not only that they need to do something to kind of psychologically, but they also need to make change. They also need to actively and proactively work with us to make sure that the piece of the pie isn't being apportioned to us, but that we can go and cut ourselves a piece and there's no issue, there's no friction. And I
Yeah.
think that's the combination and the balance that we have to get to, and empowering ourselves to really feel comfortable to lead, partake in those conversations, because it's not easy when you are the Black woman to sometimes lead the conversation about.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 And you have to be so conscious about how you do it, right? Because again, if someone is looking at you and saying, "Oh, I don't really engage with, Black women in my life, but there's this woman called Aisha who sits on the board with me, and she is so angry and so intense. Why would you want to invite another Aisha onto your board if that's what you think that Aishas look like, right? Rather than saying there's this Black woman called Aisha on my board and she, contributes, amazing insights that I would never really understand or grasp myself or are outside my realm of experience. And she opens up these conversations about why we need more of her and the journey that she's faced in trying to get here, like completely different approaches. So I always try to be conscious of showing up in a way that is, again, inviting. And I think the thing about also who holds the power is so important, because I've also had to grapple with the idea of wealth distribution, for example. And as you sort of move through your career and become more comfortable, like, what does that mean for people who don't have those opportunities or still sit at the bottom of the economic pyramid? And I think I see it as sort of this dual responsibility. The one is making sure that you're not being the person who is, I want this huge gap, and this huge level of inequality to be sustained because that's what benefits me. But at the same time, also recognizing that that table, that room is small, and there are people, again, in the across the world who are part of, sit around those tables, are in those rooms of of uber wealth, who don't involve people of color usually. And Chamath Palihapitiya, who's the US billionaire investor, he put it so well, where he said, my job personally, like, different people have different roles in this. My job, and the way I see my job, and he's someone who was also an immigrant, and I think his parents were domestic workers as well, and had odd jobs. And he says, my job is to be in that room. That's all I want for me, and that's fine. He says, I want to be at that table, because if you are not at that table as a person of color, there are no people of color at the table who are part of decision making. So he's made it his mission to just be like, I want enough money that I'm at the table and I'm doing decision making, and I can decide who to invest in, and that's going to include people who are doing impactful things and people of color. That's fine. That's fine. But I think it is important.
No, I agree. And I think one of the precepts or concepts we have to get our heads around, even though it can sometimes feel distasteful, is that money brings influence. No, money brings power, and power brings influence. And people don't like to think about it, but that's the reality. And it's an interlinked trifecta, and we can't get away from them. And I think as we move up, and I'm not talking about, in terms of money, I'm talking about, as we move up the ladder of being able to be in certain places, the question does have to be, and, I think it should be for anyone who wants to change the world, is when I'm sitting in this room, how much can I change for others who won't even get close? Because it's not for the person who's going to come in the room after you that you're wanting to change it. You're wanting to change it for the person who, in many ways, is so far away from you that they can't even imagine this room, but you think of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's like as I started out in my career, I don't think I thought about giving back in that way. Like I thought about giving back when I was at school, and I used to mentor younger girls, and I used to coach people for netball, but like when I was at work, but I didn't think so much about the importance of giving back to, in many ways, the younger version of me. They could be me. And as I'm moving through, and for the past few years, it's been an active thought and action, because it's so important. If you think about operating in any which way sustainably, you can't just earn money. You have to give of yourself to make sure that you're earning stuff and you're trying to change things here. But are you also giving back to those who don't have the same opportunities? Because we're embracing that part of, there's an element of privilege that we all have been able to sit simply in this room.
Yeah. But it's a lot, Leanne. It's a lot as well, right? Because I'm just thinking as you're saying it, I'm just thinking about all the things that, and I think we need to also be kind to each other. And sometimes I feel like, and I'm just going to sort of put myself out there. Sometimes I feel like on social media, the negative feedback from Black women is harsher. And in fact, that's where a lot of it comes from, right? And I think it's a lot, because the expectation is that, okay, you must chart the course, right? And be the person who's doing it, and be one of firsts, in an industry where you are severely underrepresented. 2%, I think, of global technology funding goes towards women. I think the amount that goes towards Black women is,
I think it's like 0.02% or something like that. Yeah.
Right. So that's the environment that I'm operating in, right? So, but shine, deliver, perform in that environment. I'm a mom of 3 kids. Do that well as well. Be a wife well as well. I'm a sister and a daughter, and an aunt and a cousin. Do that well as well. Then do all of that while you are also bringing everyone up with you. Also do it in a way where your conduct publicly is exemplary, and everything you say has to be agreeable and on point, and digestible. I just think sometimes we are not kind to each other, and sometimes the expectations feel almost impossible.
When I say it, like, I can't imagine what that feels like. I legitimately can't. And the only reason why I can't is just because, I can take criticism, but this whole holding ourselves up to impossible standards, or people expecting us to be perfect. It's like, I was talking last week, and it was what Denzel Washington said. He said, people who are doing more than you never have time to watch what you're doing. And in many cases, it's that, like, I had someone come for me to say, how exactly am I sacrificing anything to do what I'm doing? It's rich of me. And she was a Black woman. It was rich of me to be talking about this stuff when she knows nothing of my life, but, when I have a comfortable life and I'm talking. And on the one hand, it does feel hurtful, but on the other hand, it's like, you don't see my life. You don't see the realities of what I have to do. You don't see the sleepless nights. You don't see the frustrations, the tears, the rejections. You don't see any of that. What you see is, you see a version of me, but you don't actually know me. And sometimes it's hard to remember that part, because I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. And I refuse to and Denzel Washington's one was the one that stood out for me, is like, if people are doing more, they really don't have time to criticize you. And when I put that into perspective, I'm like, yeah, my first question is, what are they doing? It's fine to criticize me. You don't have to agree, but what are you doing to counter what you think I'm doing badly? It's okay to be a keyboard. It's okay to be a keyboard warrior. And I think we have to, and sometimes, when people troll anybody anyway, and this is any color, it's projection. It's, why haven't I done it? She thinks she's so perfect. There's no thinking you're perfect. You're just getting on with what you need to get done. And I think that's and I'll say this because I think it's true, that part of this sisterhood isn't, for me anyway, it's not that I want to be part of a global sisterhood for the sake of it, just to be a big room of Black women talking. No. You made the point as well. I want to be around Black women with a growth mindset, who have the desire to uplift each other, who have the desire to talk to each other, console each other if need be, to be open, to be willing to say, hey, you could have done that better, but I understand. And who also want to put opportunity. It's not about being strategic, but that it's say, look, this is what I do. If there's something that I do that's helpful, can we talk about it? Because I don't think it's this moment either to do things for the sake of it, irrespective of it being another Black woman, because it's that point. I don't want to have someone, I don't believe in keep your friends close and your enemies closer, because I simply don't have and refuse to give energy to playing a game of manipulation with anyone. Like, if we're not in this together, then ciao.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's got to be edifying. It's got to be that we're truly sharing the same goal of making the world a better place collectively in our own different ways, and not to look at each other as competition. To your point about the pie is massive. Someone might have told you there's only this much pie for people who look like us, but it ain't true. How do we work together to see how big the pie is? How do we work together to have these conversations? And in many ways, how do we retrain our thought process to not feel jealous of somebody else's success, but rather find a way to learn to embrace it, and also lean into the jealousy. Like, why do you feel it? What's the root cause of it? What could you be doing better? There's so much to explore in our rawest feelings, be them anger, jealousy, whatever. It's a sign of something. It's embracing being able to explore what that is. Why does Aisha make you feel salty? It might not be you. You might just be a representation of something that makes somebody feel like they're underachieving. I can still remember the moment when, and this is not a work thing, but I still remember the moment where some of my friends started to settle down, and I was like, this is boring. What? And I realized at the time maybe that I was salty, or it was annoying me because they had something that I wanted. Or did I want it? And I had to go on the question, like, did I want that? Or was I just annoyed because they seemed happy and it was a different lifestyle to mine? It's being able to explore the discomfort, as you don't have to be perfect. None of us do. Not as role models, not in any which way. It's just it's trial and error. Like, life is an experiment, I think.
No, absolutely. And I think, this is sometimes where I think, increasing use and responsiveness to social media, and sort of building up your idea of that being a real representation of life, can be super dangerous. And I think also the impact of the pandemic around not having enough face-to-face, in-person conversations with a broad range of people. I think that's where this can become really dangerous, because you can sort of vent out your frustrations, and then not have any feedback, and not have that friend who goes, when you're having a conversation with someone and you go, oh, that, she's so annoying, I can't. And if it's a good friend, they should say, not, oh yeah, she is annoying. They should go, like, why? Like, why? Why?
But suppose she really is annoying.
Let's chat about this. That might be the case. In which case, then go have a good gossip. But a lot of the time, the friend going, like, why do you think that? And and like let's explore, let's explore what that means to you, or what that does to you, or why that irks you. I think the other thing also, when you sort of when you other someone and you go, I don't like this person, I'm closed off to them again, there's an opportunity there that you just shut the door down on, because you could go, hey, if someone is doing something and it's in my space and I'm curious about how they've done it, instead of going, hey, you only got this because blah, 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 you only did this because, why don't you DM them and go, hey, I'm also doing this. I'm also running a business. I'm also wanting to raise funding. I'm also in this industry. Could we have a 30-minute chat where I ask you some questions about how you've done what you've done? That's so much more constructive. But I think, it's just too easy nowadays to kind of go like, I don't like you. And then, and then that's the end of it, and you feel good about yourself, as opposed to grabbing an opportunity or exploring like what's really happening. And then I think the other thing to also say is that, unfortunately, also the nature of the way that we communicate nowadays is that you won't have the 100 people. And I've actually looked at this on YouTube, because I watch YouTube videos that are beautiful, and so like radiating love, and then you'll see thousands of people like thumbs down it, and I'm like, how is that possible? But the ratio is almost consistently, I think it's 2 to 4% of people who watch a video don't like it. But you forget our nature as human beings, and I think again the nature of this sort of communication is that you don't focus on, and often you don't hear back from the 96 to 98% who are super supportive and who love what you put out there. And often the loudest voices are the 2 to 4% who are disapproving.
That's true. I just wanted to say about liking people. I'm not going to talk about online, but I will say in like real life, if I don't like someone, I just don't like them, and it's an instinct thing. I can't bend. And every time I've not liked someone within the first millisecond, and I've decided to ignore my instinct, I was right the first time. So I just want to say, like, that is like online skews in many cases your ability to really make a judgment, because everything that we see online, and this is like my Instagram is no real, like, it's a reflection of my life in the moment, but it's not a sum total of changing nappies and sitting over the laptop and all this other stuff. But the point is that people had more time to curate their version of how they think people want to see their lives. But even the reflection of that isn't really real. And I think that's where, like, as much as I love social media, I also hate it. And I think for me, that's been one of the things to try and embrace, which is you don't always have to be there. You don't always have to be present. Like, spend time living life, as opposed to believing that what you see is really
a reflection of what anyone's life looks like.
Correct.
Or something to try and live up to.
Correct.
I mean, imagine trying to live up to someone else's Instagram feed. Imagine whoever you actively follow on Instagram thinking that was their life, and then trying to live your life like that. Impossible.
It's tiring. It's tiring. And I think that's why there has to be, like, I've got my new podcast called Breaking Out of the Box, and it's really around that. It's about, like, we have to stop idolizing superheroes. There are so many amazing women who I call everyday heroes, just like yourself, who are doing big things to change the world, and we live normal lives. Not hey, look at me, I'm on a private jet. Look at me, I've got the new ice. Like, that's great, but it's also not what we need to do. And I think there's so much about us learning to love the understated, about us learning to love the silence, embracing that. We don't always have to be the loud Black woman. Like, I happen to be loud, that's just the way I am, but like, clearly you're not as loud as I am, and that's fine. We do come in all shapes, sizes, personality types. It's just about us being able to be authentically us in every which way, and finding a way to live that through the support systems, the structures, the friends we have, the colleagues we choose, and that's irrespective of color, just structuring our lives to mean that we understand our own value and that is mirrored back to us, as opposed to feeling as though we have to be an imitation of something that wasn't a system that was never made for us to enter anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing of what gets mirrored back to you, I think, is so important as well. I also meet people that it doesn't happen often because I don't know. I do love, I'm introverted, but I also love people. I just love, I don't know, I love engaging with people. But when I do meet someone that I don't like or that I don't immediately gel with, I also don't need to engage with them. So I also I find it so curious when you're like, I don't like you, but I'm gonna, pull you into my friend group, and now I'm gonna gossip about you every single day. If you don't like someone, don't
leave them be.
You don't need to engage with them. If you don't like what someone's doing or building or whatever, don't engage. You don't need to. If someone is doing something that is blatantly wrong and you need to address the issue, then sure, address that issue. But don't build it into this long-lasting, toxic, relationship and engagement with people. And I see this with celebrities, right? Especially woman on woman, where you don't like someone as a celebrity, and now you're on there, every story that there ever is about them, and you're engaged. I believe in karma, but not in the sense that what you do comes back around. I believe in karma in the sense that how you respond and how you live your life has an impact on your state of being. And I just think, again, if you surround yourself with energy that you don't like, and then you actively invite that energy in, open the door, come in. Now every day I'm going to spend, an hour engaging on, I don't like this person and they dress like this and they're famous because of this and whatever. And I see it with, proper celebrities. I just why would you bring that into your energy space? It doesn't really make sense to me. And I often think on social media, when people are engaging in, Kim Kardashian's doing this or whoever's doing this, I'm like, I am not going to use my energy for bashing down another woman who's doing what she's doing. That's not how I want to spend my time. Whether it's her or anyone else, not interested.
I think we have to get better at actively pushing away negativity and not using it as fodder to kind of create, as you said, if someone's wrong, then we can have a little gossip about it. Don't get me wrong, people, I love a little gossip. Gossip about it, I'm not gonna lie. But at the same time, it's how much time do we spend engaging in that? And sometimes you learn this to your detriment, but they say, what is it? All skin folk aren't kinfolk. So it's that thing about, if somebody isn't, if you want to build or be a part of a global sisterhood, but you're noticing that the vibe is off, if you're noticing that it's all centered around negativity, the negativity is the engine that's running the sisterhood. It's not wrong to take a step back. It's not wrong to, we're not all the same, irrespective of skin color. Nobody is, there's good and bad in every single nation, culture, whatever. It's isolating what's good for you and making sure that you're not doing that at the expense of saying, well, I have to do this because they look like me. It's engaging with healthy vibes, good energy, everything that's edifying, because ultimately all of this stuff, like you said, all of this stuff has an effect on how you feel about yourself. It has an effect on how you work. It has an effect on how you show up and how you are seen. And it also has an effect on the next generation. You don't know who's watching. You don't know who's looking at you to be a role model. And you don't know who's looking at you to be I always say, as Black women, we never get to make a first impression. We're always defined by the other Black woman that this person might know. You don't know when you're actually the benchmark for any decisions that are being made. So it's a lot for us to think about, and we know that that's the price we pay because of the way the system has been built. But at the same time, positivity and embracing all of our strengths and who we are and our weaknesses give us a better foundation to be able to move forward and actually get to the point where we embrace each other and look to change things for the future.
100%.
So, Christian, where can everybody find you? As in, what social handles are you willing to share?
I don't have time to have secret social handles or any that are. Yeah. I'm on Twitter, just Twitter and Instagram, both under Aisha Pandor. It might even be Aisha R Pandor, but I think just Aisha Pandor.
Okay.
So my name, as you see it on the screen. And then SweepSouth, also, if you want to hear more about what we're doing, we have the SweepSouth handles on both Instagram and Twitter, and Facebook. We also have a blog that's quite active and also gives a good idea about the sorts of things that we care about. In addition to that, we also have a foundation that supports all of the Sweep stars who work through our platform and helps with big projects that they might need help with that are life-changing. So we've got our blog, SweepSouth, blog.sweepsouth.com, and then also on our page, you'll find a link to our foundation.
Perfect. Thank you. It has been such a good conversation. We have covered, I think we've run the gamut of topics, and it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on. And I hope that this won't be our last chat.
I'm sure not.
I think everyone knows where to find me on Instagram at Leanne MM. And then I think I'm connected to everybody here on LinkedIn. So have a great Thursday.
Awesome.